Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is a long time coming, and a series that I've had my eyes on for quite some time, from the incredible mind of ForestHasEyes, from over on Reddit, No Sleep. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further, and why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled I'm a security guard hired to protect an estate. The forest has eyes. Part 7. Let's get straight into that. We aren't retreating. We're advancing in another direction. That's what I'm branding this expedition. It's become clear to Isaac and I that the anomalies descended upon the Casamoth estate are growing more and more untamable by our current means. And sure, we could constantly dump thousands of rounds into the being that lurked outside the walls. But what about the ones that lurked within them? The entities that seemed to be tampering with the machines we were using. The ones that showed me they can easily rip apart the electrified wires I trust to protect the land. And we need someone who can aid us in this. Someone who's skilled in identifying the paranormal, and who, hopefully, will have the means to stop it. And I knew only one from the local sources, a herbalist named Roseanne, ran a shop on the far side of town. And so we loaded up the SUV. Isaac brought along a duffel bag he called his necessities. And I swear I saw something move inside. And John brought an overnight bag. And I closed the trunk of the SUV, my eyes centered on the 3 black cases in the back of the SUV. The sound of the door shutting snapped me back to reality. Time to go. I hopped into the driver's seat, starting up the engine, which after a moment finally roared and kicked into a start. I looked at Isaac. He was ragged, mangy. The entirety of his eye was bandaged to hell. I had insisted that we take him to hospital, but Isaac protested, saying that his literally bleeding cornea wasn't that big of an issue. What a trooper. I was sitting there, glazed over eye, and a beer in his hand, and the gates started to open. I checked the car's touchscreen GPS, trying to see where in town this Roseanne shop was, and Isaac chimed in. The fuck is that? I felt dread overcome me as I gazed upon the small screen. I looked up. In the center of the driveway laid a wheelchair, sitting upright, facing the gate, dead center of the driveway. Should I run it over? Asked Isaac, who just took a swig of his beer. John peeked over the seat around this time. What if it's a trap? Indeed, what if it was? I unbuckled my seatbelt, the sound of it sliding back as I opened the door, and stepping outside, I walked up to it. And as I did, something else became clear to me. The chair was surrounded by various articles of clothing. Children's clothing. Bonnets, raincoats, shoes, a dirty jack-o'-lantern bucket, all of them, looking like they were dipped into a peat bog, surrounding the shiny leather. Clean. I walked around the front of the car and then approached it. The crunching of the gravel was a white noise as I approached it. Then the sound grew louder and louder. The gravel underneath my feet was almost deafening as I stepped outside. And then it hit me as the thing was 3 feet away. It's 12 p.m., early October. The fauna is still green and cool. The only thing I could hear was my footsteps and the sound of the car humming behind me. Not a sound from the forest. Not a bird, a cricket, a squirrel. This was no longer the security guard, the warden of the land patrolling his grounds. I was a small man in unfriendly territory. I stared down at the chair, angry from all of this bullshit. I grabbed it and heaved it leftwards. It cracked off a tree before rolling into the grass lopsided. And then I stared down at the clothing. Why? Actually, fucking why? Why this? Why these kids? Why any of this? Snap. My warrior instincts kicked in as a tree branch pierced the dead silent air to my 8 o'clock, front right at the gate. I withdrew my pistol and aimed. Nothing. Still trees, grass, nothing. "This is private property," I yelled, my voice one of the only sounds audible, echoing off the surrounding trees. And then from my left I could hear an exhale. I spun, pistol aimed. Nothing. The chair was bait. But who set it? Back to the gate. Nothing could get in. Surely I'd seen it before. "Hey!" My soul jumped out of my skin as I, a grown US Army veteran, proceeded to leap left like a scared antelope. A voice shouted right next to my ear, and I fired to the right of my gate several times, almost emptying my weapon. Shots went flying through the air, and one impacted a tree, the other scraped off the wall, and then one nearly missed the metal stand of that motherfucking skeleton. "Tim!" I shouted at the inanimate object. I gazed at my pistol. Turns out I was wrong. I did empty the magazine. "Knock!" The grating voice radiated through my skull as I ran my hand down my face, squeezing my temple as I stared up at him. Did he set this all up? I gazed back at the wheelchair before locking eyes with the empty sockets of this thing. "Timothy, what the fuck?" Before I could finish my sentence, the passenger door of the SUV opened and Isaac emerged, peering over the gap. Are you okay?" Isaac asked in a concerned tone. "A little fucking startled. Why the fuck didn't you warn me?" I said, more bitter at the sounds of the fuck sitting in the car that let that happen than the calcium construct itself. "Warn you about what?" Isaac said, face and voice drenched with confusion. I was taken aback, my head shaking in disbelief as I extended a hand outwards. "The fucking skeleton." "What skeleton?" My eyes shot across from me. Nothing there but a small pile of bullet casings. I was shocked. No, it was Tim after all. I looked through the windshield at John, who had his headphones in and was busy with his phone. "You alright? You drunk?" Isaac called, the forest around us still quiet. "Yeah, just get in the damn car." Well, the drive to town was fairly uneventful. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, expecting some sort of beast to finally say "fuck it" and charge the car. I'm finally ready to end this charade, but it never happened. Then we reached the end of the dirt road, and Isaac had found a Sharpie and, quaintly, drawn a skull and crossbones on his damaged eye. "There!" He tossed the marker aggressively back into the glove compartment. "Now I'm a goddamn pirate." Though he does have the alcoholism to be one. Sorry, really not the time. As I turned onto the main road, I peered back at John. "John, we're going to drop you off at your friend's house, just like last time. That cool?" John nodded, eyes fixated on his tablet as we drove. It's then that Isaac chimed in, spinning around in his chair to meet John with his good eye. "Hey, kid." The trucker rested his chin on the headrest, crossing his arms around the back of the seat. "How you holding up with all this?" I looked back to see John pause, whatever he was playing, pulling out his earbuds. "I mean, depends. How should I handle this?" John spun one of the buds in a circle by the cord. "Well, ghouls living outside your house, ghosts living in them. We still don't know if it was really a ghost." I slipped in, though you and him could probably write me a college seminar on why I'm wrong. Shut up, skeptic. Anyways," Isaac then held out one of his hands towards me. "Look, I know it's going to seem odd with your dad leaving a minute ago, but Dwight and I'll keep you safe. You understand?" And John snickered. "Oh, I know that. You guys did buy enough guns to take over the town." That was not a good impression. I pried one of my hands from the steering wheel, scratching the back of my neck. "Yeah," I said, feeling a bit guilty. We did flash a ton of hardware in front of the kid, whether his situation warranted it or not. "They're in good hands, John." Isaac jabbed my right shoulder with his fist. "Hell yeah. Self-defense only, bud. And with the ghouls, it was always self-defense." I dare not mention how Isaac almost mowed down a group of hikers when we were clearing that trail of debris just a few weeks ago. We pulled up to the quiet little town, exactly as it had been when we last stopped in it. A light mist from the mountains had travelled down, hanging over the town. A sawmill, smoke pouring out in the distance, the bar, neon lights flashing in the windows, and yet not a goddamn person on the street. And we came to a stop at the intersection. The armoured-up Toyota slowed into a halt at the deserted crosswalk. I dropped one hand to the middle compartment to my right, leaving one hand on the steering wheel, and tapped my fingers, anticipating a moment that it would turn green. It didn't arrive quick. Me and my part-time trucker friend gazed around, John's fingers tapping on his tablet, along with the hum of the engine, created this ambient white noise. And I waited, expecting someone or anyone to come around the corner, but it never happened. The mist from the rainy season created a distant wall that the streets blended into, and yet silence and desertion was all that occupied it. I looked up. The light shone red. Gazed around and looked to John, still typing. Looked to Isaac, eye bandaged, with some pus leaking out at the bottom. I looked to the light, still red. I'd say if this were nighttime, we'd get jumped. But we both know this shit around here ain't afraid of hitting us in the day, Isaac said, uncapping the top of his bottle as he took yet another swig. I don't know if he's using it as a pain reliever, since its use as a confidence booster ultimately failed last night during our basement adventures. But regardless, it seemed to have an endless supply. And then my fingers tapped the lever-lined steering wheel. Isaac finally finished off the small bottle and then pulled out a flask from his back pocket. Why am I not surprised? My eyes darted to the deserted streets, the milky grey and white mist wall obscuring what lay behind. I swear, I don't know if it was eye floaters, but I saw a movement just behind the mist, out of the corner of my eye. My eyes snapped to the light. Green. I'm pretty sure I nearly floored the pedal as I peeled out of that stoplight. I pulled the SUV up in front of the house, same as last time. John gathered up his belongings, shoving them all into his pull-cord backpack. He waved at us as he hurried up the sidewalk to the house. I cleared my throat. I was feeling dry, parched. The last time we came here, the town felt eerie, but had some semblance of, not sanctuary, but controlled chaos. Now, felt like I was dropping John off right in the middle of those goddamn woods. Across the street, the fish-eyed neighbour stood, watching him as he trundled up the steps into the house, and then at us. He held a pair of hedge clippers and chopped mindlessly at the poor bush in front of him. So much so, he finally stopped when he nearly gutted it by cutting the main stem in half. And then he dragged the clippers on the sidewalk as he shuffled up the stairs, sliding into his house. What a charming fellow, Isaac said. Charming, sure. We arrived on the western end of town, right before a big stone bridge that crossed an even bigger river. It was more of a suburban area. Well, actually, with a town this rural, is anything even suburban? Roseanne's herbalist shop was similarly built into her own house, like those personal businesses, some built in the middle of neighbourhoods. The entrance was at the back. Isaac and I pulled into the driveway and walked towards the house. And Isaac tossed his flask into the car and then pulled out another as he walked up the asphalt path. I swear he's going to kill his liver at this rate. A smell of violets, herbs, and a scent pierced the stale air of fall around us. And hanging from the side of the house was a stained glass sign reading, Roseanne Solutions. Above the red glass letters, a dark purple skull icon, and with a multitude of what I think were feathers floating around it. Huh, Isaac said as we both stared at her. That's comforting. I shut the car off, stepping out into the cool air and approached the back entrance, and Isaac joined me. So, he said, stretching out his words, going to a witch's hut on the edge of town. Tell me, you think she praises Cthulhu or Satan? Had this been weeks earlier, I would have decided against approaching what Isaac said a witch's house. But this, it wasn't weeks ago, and we were now down options, several rounds and one good eye. I knocked on the door 3 times. The paint on the door was chipped, showing a lack of maintenance. Her house was grown in. Large hedges, trees, plants, vegetables all seemingly defiant to the autumn air that was around her land, and yet all neatly groomed and maintained. This would be any botanist's wet dream. Isaac balanced himself on the wooden railing of the back porch, scratching at the edge of his eye. Pus leaked out from the bottom, green and black in nature, against my previous hopes. "Don't do that," I cautioned. "Why?" he said, shoulders slumping. "I'd probably fuck like that for good anyways." He sounded far more defeated than usual, and I felt guilty. If I had just been quicker. On the bright side, I guess he will get use out of his eye patch. Right? Sorry, again, not the time. My hand beat on the old wooden door of the building again, irritated this time. "Roseanne?" I called out. I looked at the schedule, taped to the door. Roseanne Solutions. Whenever the stars align, I will be at your aid. Monday through to Thursday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Friday to Saturday, 24 hours. And Sunday, midnight. "Kinda odd hours, but," Isaac said, and grabbed a rock, tossing it at the door, which bounced off it with a large thud. "Roseanne, open the hell up!" And suddenly the door shot wide open, the sound of heavy wind emanating from within. The door missed my face by nearly an inch, maybe. While I stumbled back, the suddenness caused poor Isaac to topple over, back into the hedge, head first. I walked over to the banister. "You all right?" I called out. Isaac's hand rose from inside the bush like a submarine's periscope, giving a thumbs up. He painstakingly clawed his way out as he gazed at the door. A dim entranceway, cluttered with chests and plants, greeted us, and yet no one else in sight to have opened the door. Yep, my assertion was correct. This definitely was a voodoo house. As we entered the building, the strange and exotic smells grew. Lavender, cherries, freshly cut soap. And remember when I said cluttered? Isaac and I'd like to say we aren't particularly husky, but this place, we had to squeeze between trees and large boxes in order to get through. And we finally reached the red velvet curtain, a piece of notebook paper pinned onto it. The inner sanctum. And Isaac looked to me. I looked to Isaac. I then leaned in towards the curtain. Roseanne? Go away. A female voice came from behind the curtain. We're closed. We, I thought. Isaac chirped up. Hey, listen, lady. It's Friday. You said you were open all day today. Now open up. And there was silence for a few seconds, and then the candles and weak lights around us flickered. No! Frustration welled inside of me, and I finally had enough. I threw open the curtain and charged in, Isaac right behind me. And as we entered, it was a makeshift laboratory, and what looked like a living room was layered in plants, head to toe, ceiling to floor, and a large table with pipes, glasses, tubes, burners, and strange liquids of concoctions rested. And through the ambient lines of the candles and burners, I saw her. She stood at the back, hospital scrubs and a lab coat with a wool poncho over her shoulders, and a beanie covering her tan skin and long dark hair. And when she turned, she stared daggers into Isaac and I. Does no mean yes where you come from? Get out, she said, and the candles around us flickered again. You're the only person in town I've heard who can help us, I argued, though it did little to quell her rage. And why should I help you? Everyone in this town has problems. Everyone comes to me. And just because 2 scruffy-faced men burst in, that means I must help you? She said, slamming down her glass vial hard, and it, surprisingly in retrospect, didn't shatter. Lady, our problems aren't like the rest of the town's. I remember that black gong from the engine, sealed in a Ziploc bag. I'll make that 2 bags. I held it up, and her eyes squinted, and then widened, as she held out her hand. I tossed it across the table and she caught it and began inspecting. Where did you? she said in disbelief, almost like she had prior knowledge of whatever the fuck it was. Kasimov estate. Oh! And she dropped the bag of black gunk onto the table. I'm sorry, but whatever is happening there is far out of my range. Why? Isaac bellowed out. Just some weirdos in the woods. Batshit phantoms. Paintings that cut my fucking eye out. You do that whole flickering light shtick, and yet you're too afraid to help us. What makes it so weird from the rest of town? I took the words right out of my mouth. My redneck Cyclops friend. Roseanne crossed her arms. Before Kasimov, Theodore, is that his name? I nodded. Before he arrived, the woods were strange, but they were contained to the deepest reaches, the recesses we'd never journeyed to. However, I don't know what happened, but him building his property there riled up something. Now, even the town itself has been suffering. Her hand shot to her chin as she looked into the bag. Vaguely cryptic as that might be, Roseanne. I shoved my hands into my pockets. Our compound, a marvel of several millions of dollars in custom hardware, was breached. Not from the woods, but from inside. It nearly took down all the fancy defenses, and like Isaac said, it took his eye with it. Roseanne looked over to Isaac. His gauze was bandaged up, and he smiled through his beard, giving her a thumbs up. She looked at me in the eyes, and I believed we understood each other, or at least she believed what I was saying. I want to. I would, but like I said, everyone in this town needs help, and I'm just one person. We got a custom battle wagon parked outside. Baby, it can hit 80 miles per hour, despite being armored up like a tank. We'll give you a lift. Isaac said, offering up my car. Well, technically Theodore's, but he left it to me, and I wasn't in the mood to argue ownership right now. And she looked at me. You can do that? I shrugged. If it'd get the ball rolling, or let's go get your errands done. And she laughed. Errands? Yes. And she held up her hand, slapping the other as she crossed her arms. All right, let's do it. And that's how it happened. The engine's running now, and our professional witch doctor is inside collecting her things. And Isaac's taking a leak right in front of her house. Jesus, dude. Roseanne says she's only had a handful of calls that have been answered right this second. Then we'll head back to the estate. I don't know how cell service will work across the town. It's been spotty today, and strangely, it wasn't like that a few weeks ago before the mist. It might just be a water-clogged cell tower. Regardless, I will update as soon as possible. This is the head chief and still sole member of the Kasimov Estate Security Force. Dwight Nolan, signing out. I'm a security guard hired to protect an estate. The forest has eyes. Part 8. Let's get straight into that. Oh boy. You know, I don't know why I thought things were going to somehow get more normal after I recruited Roseanne. Maybe I believed her insight would gain some clarity on the ongoing crisis plaguing this strange-ass town, in these strange-ass woods, that so happened to contain a strange-ass estate that I, for some reason, let my ass get contracted to protect. And yet, I somehow slipped from my mind that I had basically recruited a witch. And though this didn't pierce my mind at all, after I signed off last, I sat in the driver's seat of my warmed, heated, $70,000 armoured SUV and run over the pressing matters in my head. Get Roseanne's task done, link up with John, exorcise the house, exorcise the whole fucking forest, and then, hopefully, celebrate by getting drunk. That was if we didn't meet some untimely demise, whether by falling down a hole and getting ripped up or by ending up like Margaret Thompson. She was a town native who went on a morning stroll through the woods, and they recovered her body 2 weeks later. She was found 40 miles from her house, her body still warm in an otherwise freezing forest, most of her vital organs missing, although no surgical marks were found, and a shoe was found in her left lung. Shit like that. I read every single missing person sheet on that board. And Margaret was just one of many who don't get brutally murdered. They just disappear, caught up in unexplained occurrences. I wonder if that will happen to me. Sure, I had recruited Roseanne and I had Isaac at my back, although I did watch him take a leak on her own flamingo and proceed to strike up a conversation with a garden gnome. Even with the people at my back, am I just going to become another statistic? Is John? Will the Kasimov estate disappear one day, leaving nothing but gravel and dust? No, not on my watch. Isaac zipped himself back up, waved to the fucking garden gnome, and then climbed back into the passenger seat. He laughed as he shut the door. Funny guy. Hey, so, where are we heading first? He asked, popping open a glove compartment, and another fucking bottle of booze pops out. Seriously? I shrugged, leaning against the window as I watched the driveway. She says she needs to make 2 urgent stops and then we're good. Hopefully, this will go by fast. Yeah, you think she can stop whatever's happening back at the house? Isaac's question bounced around in my head. I even had to stop and ask myself that. I don't expect her to stop whatever it is. Our superior American firepower will take care of that. It was at this point Rose exited her house, walking towards the car with a large bag slung around her shoulder. I expect her to figure out what the fuck's going on. Roseanne opened the door and tossed her bag into the back, opposite side. Then she slid right in and sat in the middle of the back seat, eyeing both Isaac and I. Well now, what a change. Finally got me some minions to do my bidding, she said, sarcasm oozing. She buckled her seatbelt, and it was at this point I finally picked out her accent. British, a hint of Westminster. I know a guy from back when, in Kuwait, had the same tone. I put the car in reverse and slid out onto the street. I opened up the touchpad GPS and let her plug in the place, and it was on the North Roadway, out of town. As she put it, it's the plantation house-looking place. Strange for Missouri, but it's been here for a fat minute. It's got a large stone bridge, and if I'm correct, it'll be important. Roseanne trailed off, and she started reading a notebook she pulled from her bag. Isaac later told me that whatever was written in there looked straight out of Rosetta Stone. Hieroglyphics, runes, something he said looked like a messed up fairy. But whatever she was reading, she understood enough to zone out. On the way there, we got caught up at another intersection, right behind the salt mill. Even with the windows closed, you could hear the sound of the machinery, pouring salt onto piles, smokestacks spewing smoke, on all sides parking lots with construction equipment and vehicles devoid of life surrounded us. Hey, Roseanne, I asked. She pried her eyes to look at me through the rearview mirror. What's up? I looked around sidewalks, roads, paved lots, so much equipment, infrastructure, and yet no one. Why is this place always a goddamn ghost town? And Roseanne slid from the middle over to Isaac's side, the right side. She gazed out and around the vehicle. That's odd. Well, not really odd. I mean, when I first came here, no one and their mother wanted to talk to me, but once I got settled after a few months, I started seeing a few. So what? They're shy? Isaac asked. Well, it's noon. I don't know why they're not out. I gotta say, Dwight, I don't know, she said, sliding back to her book and continuing her read. Great. Even our resident occultist doesn't know what's going on around this place. Our drive was relatively uneventful. Isaac and Roseanne got to small talking, mostly about where they had travelled. Roseanne apparently had been across the Americas, Venezuela, Brazil, Chile, Panama, Guatemala, Mexico, and so far has been around the southern half of the US. Isaac, as you all know, casually went camping in the woods for a few months and somehow found himself in Missouri, 2 whole states away, as he put it.
You somehow travelled several hundred miles, and you didn't stop to think that maybe you should go back?
She said, astounded as she took notes.
Nope,
Isaac said proudly, taking a swig from his bottle.
Oh, and it's several 125, thank you.
This just fueled Roseanne's curiosity.
Did you see any paranormal sights on your journey? Louisiana swamps, the Missouri goat den?
And Isaac shrugged. He scratched his hairy chin and pondered, eyebrow raised above his eye patch.
Nah, really. I did hear a lot of shit outside my tent. God damn it, I'm pretty sure there was like 10 whole silhouettes standing around me back in North Texas. Twas this weird place, a gas station. Couldn't tell you what state. Weird fella, that guy.
This went on for what I thought was goddamn hours. The drive was only 20 minutes. The road led through a small patch of trees, out to a large T intersection, and dead ahead was the stone bridge. Probably a near 100-meter stretch across a river. And to the left was a road that followed the river. And to the right... Alright, how do I explain this? The river curves, forming a large swath of land to the right of the bridge. On that piece of land lies a cultivated mass of cherry trees, hedges, groomed grass, and a stone and metal fence, all leading to a large iron gate. We pulled up to the gate, and Roseanne waved to a camera mounted on one of the sides, and they slowly opened. A small driveway led to a circle drive and a large white-painted plantation house, just as she had explained. Stone columns, old but well-maintained furnishings on every inch, from the ground to the tiled roofs. And as I pulled up in front of the house, Isaac let out a long whistle.
Someone is rolling in green out here. Look at those columns.
He was right. Whoever lived here, they were wealthy. And as far as I've learned from Casimoth, sometimes the wealthy need help dealing with demons underneath their tiled roofs.
Well, let's go, lads,
Roseanne quipped as she stepped out of the car. Isaac and I looked at each other, and we followed. He shoved the bottle of Jameson into his cargo pants and straightened his cap. The beeping sound of me locking the car was one of the only audible noises around us. Silence and the cold autumn wind blanketed the property. Roseanne knocked on the door, standing tall and professional as she waited. I leaned on one of the columns, arms crossed, trying to look like a background character while she worked. Although not observant, whatever went on, I wanted to keep an eye on it. Might come in handy later. Isaac sat on the edge of a flower pot near the opposite column, and then fell in, and then tipped the pot over, causing it to spill out onto the steps below. I was caught somewhere between laughing and sighing, and Roseanne said something to the effect of,
What did you do?
Before she heard the audible sound of footsteps heading her way. Isaac was quick on the mark as he swept the dirt behind the column, then tossing the crack pot off the porch into a hedge as the door opened. The man was tall, and this is coming from me. Like I said, I'm 6'2", maybe 6'3", on a good day. This guy, he towered over all of us. He wore slacks and a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a vest on over it, navy blue and black. Nice taste. He pushed his circle frame glasses to the bridge of his nose. A receding hairline caused a slight shimmer off his head. He gazed around at me, at Isaac, and then squinted at the large patch of dirt underneath Isaac's feet, which he sidestepped in front of, and then to Roseanne.
You must be Dr. Roseanne,
the man asked, his voice not too deep, however sounded sophisticated, with a southern twang. Roseanne nodded, and he led the way inside, Roseanne following close behind. Isaac and I followed suit.
Dr. Roseanne,
Isaac said, cackling, although to her ire.
What's your PhD? Possessed as trees?
The man led up to a very decorated living room, dark oak wood furnished, the entire inside. A fireplace near the black corridor, family pictures, autumn decorations, and a recurring dark red on all of the fabrics created contrast. Not hard to look at, just strange. On a large lounge chair sat an older woman. She was maybe in her mid-50s. Is that bad? Should I not guess a woman's age? And wore mostly hand-knitted items, such as a scarf, sweater, pants, shoes. Or would those have been slippers then? And a skinless cat sat on her lap. But the cat also had a hand-knitted sweater. Mrs. Marks, this is the professional you requested a few days ago. Dr. Roseanne, the man said, and the woman nodded, and he strolled off into another room. Roseanne took the lead. Isaac and I hung back near the other side of the room.
Miss Marks, it's really a pleasure.
Roseanne was cut off as the woman stood up, waving her hand.
Rose, darling, please,
she said with a thick New Orleans accent, for someone who lived in Missouri.
Call me Candace.
Roseanne nodded and continued.
I'm here for the problem you called me about.
And the woman nodded. A small smile that had been at the corners of her mouth faded as she stopped petting her cat. It then stretched, leaping from her lap to Roseanne's.
Yes, honey. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I called you because I got a problem not even the town priest can handle.
Did she actually just call the local church? I still don't know. But the way she said it with such confidence. Hell, even when I first talked to Theodore about the things up at the estate, there was a slight sense of denial. Candy spoke like I now spoke. That meant she was sure of what she was dealing with.
It started a few weeks ago, when the trees started to turn orange and red. My little granddaughter, Claire, loves to play down by the riverside with her little boat and toys.
Candice laughed. It almost faded when she said,
That's when she started bringing those things back to the house every evening.
Things? Roseanne asked, and the man from before brought a dark wooden box, a small latch where a lock would go. And Roseanne took it, setting it on her lap. The cat, disgruntled, leapt off and walked over to Isaac. Isaac, slightly horrified by the sweater-wearing flesh feline. Then she opened it. And she pulled out a golden locket, although you wouldn't know that unless you got as close as I did. Rust and decay set in. The previous clam-shaped piece was now dark brown, and inside more items, all with deep personal connections, bracelets with names, necklaces with inscriptions. The list went on.
She said she was giving him gifts for playing with the lady. I didn't know what that meant. I thought some creep was stalking her, and so I sent Arnold out to keep a lookout.
Candice gestured to her tall friend. He cleared his throat. Roseanne still looking through the box.
4 hours, nothing happened. Claire continued to play, and then a hand reached out of the water, giving her the knife.
Roseanne held up the knife. It wasn't as rusted as the others. Now that I look back, it wasn't rusted at all. The silver finish to the entire outside made it look like a cake knife, until you saw its blade. Sharpened, intentionally so, to the point the silver was scraped off, and on the left side of the blade read, in cursive, to my dear and darling Candice. Roseanne looked shocked, and Candice wiped tears from her eyes as Arnold continued. We forbid her from ever going to the riverside again. Things calmed down for a week, and then yesterday, I went to her room to get her ready for school, and she was gone. Her window open, and her entire room was soaked in water. Roseanne dropped the knife back into the box, closing it and pushing it back into Arnold's arms. She stood up.
Tell me, you've called the cops?
Roseanne asked. They've filed a missing persons case and searched the riverfront. Nothing so far. Roseanne nodded, and at this point, Isaac and I stepped out into the hall, giving her a chance to talk with them alone. Isaac now held the cat in his arms, and the feline rubbed its hairless head against Isaac's beard happily. I ran my hand down my face, sitting against the wall-side table. What in the fuck? Isaac let the cat climb onto his shoulders. He reached into his pants and pulled the Jameson bottle from before, out and uncapping it.
It's gotta be a freshwater mermaid,
he said, so confident, taking a swig. Hey, I lost my train of thought, shaking my head.
What? He shrugged, bottle in one hand, cat now clinging to the other.
I don't know, but that's the first thing that came to mind. Though how to get on land, I don't know. He took another swig, offering some to the cat, as it began to lick from the lips of the bottle. Isaac, I really doubt this is a mermaid. He smiled, taking another sip and offering some more to the cat.
Dunno. That or a shark with arms. What do you think, Maurice?
Isaac passed the last portion to the cat. I looked and saw the cat had the name Maurice imprinted on its tag. Seriously, Southern house, New Orleans accent. Maurice is the name they pick for the Siamese cat. Roseanne then stepped into the hall, pulling me by the collar, and Isaac followed. Maurice and alcohol still in his arms, and we stepped outside, and Roseanne made a beeline around the house and through the hedges, not saying a word. I followed, trying to step through the thick brush that she seemingly had just cut through. Well, Roseanne didn't respond. Roseanne, and she continued to remain silent, walking through the still bright green grass, past white patio furniture, a fire pit, and the entire backyard towards the river. Roseanne, did you check the kids' room? And right when I asked that, she dead stopped, causing me to nearly crash into her as she stared at me with cold, dead eyes. Yes, she simply said, continuing her power walk towards the river. Well? Nothing, she said, again simply. What do you mean, nothing? What about the water? I went in there with her overgrown butler and nothing was amiss. Everything was dry, nothing was tampered or broken. She's vanished and all traces in her room, they're gone. She finished off sounding kind of exhausted and stopped 20 meters from the river near the bridge. Well, what did you expect? Isaac said, walking up to us, still feeding alcohol to Maurice, who was still in his arms. Mermaid's not going to leave a calling card after kidnapping a kid. It's not a... I stopped, noticing something. You hear that? Roseanne asked. Nope, Isaac said before taking his 47th swig of the hour. Exactly, she said, turning to us. This river is one of the main waterways into the area, and it's standing still. And she was right. I looked over the water. Nothing. Not a wave or a ripple or a cut in the liquid. Nothing. Welp, river's haunted. Case closed. Can we go deal with the fucking ghoul ghosts in our basement now? Isaac asked. Roseanne looked like she was about to turn and give him the be-all, end-all of ass chewings. Until I stopped her. All right, this is your turf. What do we do? The simple question stopped her, and she paused, placing her bag on the ground and kneeling down for something inside. We are going to have to go into the water. Ha! Isaac said, letting Maurice polish off his bottle. Okay, take a swim in a kidnapping river. Gosh, Dwight, you really like to recruit the best of humanity. If there is a sign of her, or remains, it's going to be in the water. We can look all we want, but we won't get any answers. Unless somebody grows a pair, besides me, and goes in. And she was right. I reached down and tucked my jeans into my boots. If I was going in, I wasn't going to get my ass bitten off by some weird-ass ill. I approached the river, eyeing it shore to shore, when it stood dead still, the kind of stillness a glass of water has when it's left in a lifeless house, the kind of stillness a pond has when no life exists within it. I took a step in, breathing the waters and creating a ripple. Something in my stomach told me I might have just pissed something off, but my hand reaching into my jacket and pulling out my Glock told me that I was about done with caring if a demon was pissed at me or not. So, what am I looking for? Exactly, I said, trudging through the water. The cold water felt like it was freezing my legs, and I gazed around. I don't know if it was the dirtiness of the water or some pollution from the salt mill, but I could barely see through the 2-foot-deep river. Wait, it's 2 feet deep? How the fuck was anything going to even fit in here, let alone avoid being spotted for weeks? Roseanne stopped, gazing through her book as she held her hand to her chin contemplating.
The bridge.
I turned back to her. Isaac, and I think even Maurice did. Or maybe it was just mimicking Isaac.
That place has a whole lot of bad mojo surrounding it. Runes, tales of sacrifices during its construction. It has to be some kind of catalyst.
And she just told me this now, after I stepped into the possessed-ass lake, and so I began trudging to the bridge. Slowly, agonizingly slow. On each step, I expected to step on a skull or a bone or something. Each other step, I expected to get pulled under and drowned, but it never happened. I reached the arch, closest to our side of the river, my trucker and witch compatriots following close from the river's edge, and every step I took was a feeler. Roseanne pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight as she walked underneath, shining it around and inspecting every aged and deteriorated inch of the bridge's stone blocks.
You can feel it,
she said, turning back to Isaac and I.
In the air, the aura of this place.
And she wasn't wrong. The second I trudged through the water under the bridge, the feeling in the air shifted. Something wasn't right. I've never been a religious person, although now I guess I'm a superstitious one. But this feeling struck a chord with me. For what I had seen downrange in my army days, the raw, bitter feeling. This was evil. This place felt evil. Roseanne flipped open her book and began inspecting some insignias carved into the rock. I shined my Glock's tack light, a small LED mounted on the bottom, into the water. It was murky, whether due to the dirt I kicked up or pollution from the mill. I could barely see my own feet. And then I stepped on something. I didn't crack, slither, or attack. I felt a corner of something poke into the rubber bottom of my boot. I gave the heads up to Roseanne and Isaac. I slipped off my jacket and tossed it to him. I then made a bold choice of reaching down into the water to retrieve the item. The smartest choice? No, but we needed to get a move on and figure out what we could do for Candice and her missing granddaughter. And I felt around, the icy cold water numbing my hand as I dug through the muddy dirt, searching for something or anything. And then I felt it. The texture felt grainy. Is that a term? Straight lines ran across it, with the sharp, although worn corners forming a strange square. No, a box. I pulled it from the depths of the river, holding it up as water splashed around me, and shined my Glock's light upon it. A well-carved box with edgings at the top and bottom, and with 4 little legs and a little rusted brass latch. And at first glance, it resembled a music box.
What is that?
Roseanne asked, shining her brighter light on it, and it was then that I could see through the damp brown wood that there were faint lines of paint. Although when I say paint, I mean I was lucky to see them, even with this right up to my face. Pink, sky blue, and purple. I tossed the box ashore to Roseanne, who immediately opened her up.
It's a music box,
she said, pulling out a small ballerina figurine. Well, guess I was right.
What's that sucker doing at the bottom of a river?
Isaac asked. By now, he had wrapped Maurice up in my coat. That and a small sweater, the cat was most well-dressed person out here. I shined my light back to the river below and stuck my hand back in. I felt a smooth surface, like one of those brand new faucets just after it's been polished. And then another, like wet fabric, and then a spiky one, and a rough one. Roseanne, I said cautiously, grabbing a handful of whatever the fuck from the bottom of the river. She shined her light on my hand as I fished it up. Jesus, even now. There was a collection of toys, items that would belong to children. I tossed them onto the grass just outside of the bridge's arch. The smooth surface was an old rusted race car, one of those older passenger ones, from the 20s, a ballet slipper, and an old beat-up baseball. What the fuck? Isaac said, he and even Maurice gazing down at the pile. Roseanne walked over, getting a close inspection of the items, and I went back to digging. I felt more than just that down there. Despite my hopes, I was right. More toys. Dinosaurs, blocks and saws. All age ranges for boys and girls. No discrimination. I pulled maybe 20 of the damn things down there before I stopped. And Roseanne sat on the grass, arms around her legs, shaking her head.
It's targeting kids.
Isaac remained silent throughout all of this, and then he glanced over at me.
Weren't those clothes you found in front of the driveway this morning? Didn't they belong to kids?
And then a moment of panic struck. As the water calmed down, the waves slowly stopped their sloshing and splashing, returning to the silent, dead-still state it had been in. Nothing had touched me. In fact, through the numbing cold of the water, it was a pain in the ass for me to even feel if I was on solid ground. And then, clear as day, I felt something grab a hold of my left leg and drag me towards the center of the river. Hell no, I was not going to become another statistic. I aimed my Glock to the water just a couple of feet from where it was pulling me. I squeezed the trigger faster than a machine gun. The 9mm rounds fired off one after the other into the murky depths, water splashing violently in my face as I backed up, fighting towards the shore. And through the ringing in my ears, I heard Roseanne and Isaac yelling, and whatever had grabbed me slowly let go. I planted a firm foot on the ground and charged out, now soaked from head to toe in cold river water. I dropped my pistol magazine, slapping another and turning, my ears ringing, and I barely heard Roseanne as she ran up, grabbing me by the shoulders and shaking me.
What did you...
Roseanne's voice sounded distant, distorted. Between this and Isaac deafening me in the basement, I was going to need hearing aids.
What did you see?
Roseanne screamed, finally breaking through my numbed eardrums. Something. It grabbed my goddamn leg, I said, sticking my finger in my ear and trying to clear it out. Roseanne turned and looked back at the water. The river stood dead still, and Isaac looked at us, holding Maurice. Nothing. I had fired off a full magazine. 17 goddamn rounds went into that river, all before charging out like a bat out of hell. And now it was just still. Where? Isaac said, pivoting towards the river and then back to us.
I guess. Riverside skinny dipping is out of the question.
I pulled back the slide, checking to see if my new rounds chambered in the hand cannon, and they did. I walked out to the Dr. Paranormal MD, my muzzle suppressed as I scanned that cursed ass stream. So, we know it's definitely possessed now. Roseanne simply stared, unaffected by my prodding.
It's kidnapped so many, and that was just what you pulled from under the bridge,
she said, her voice distant, and in thought I scanned the water, waiting, and partially hoping for something to jump out, just so I could get some payback for whatever grabbed me. Well, this is your turf war now. What do we do? My question must have triggered something, because she sprung back to life. She ran over to that book of hers, opening the worn, outer cardboard cover, and flipped to a page near the middle back.
I don't know the full nature, and it's too dangerous to keep going back in, but I have a theory.
Roseanne pulled some black chalk on a brown bag from a bigger handbag and walked to the other side of the bridge. Isaac and I followed, keeping watch. And by the time we got down there, Roseanne was already drawing something on the wall. When I tell you, I couldn't even begin to describe it. It had a large outer circle that interlinked with lines and shapes. A triangle, a morphed hexagon, some demonic-ass cursive writing. It looked like what you'd see on the padded walls of some schizo cell. Then she opened the bag and grabbed out a handful of salt. She smeared one handful into the cracks of the old bridge, and then poured some on the walkway beneath her, before taking a chunk and tossing it into the water. This caused the water to literally bubble, only slightly, and I think it might have even hissed.
It's a bit of a hypothesis, but I think it might work,
she said as she walked back to her bag, packing up her supplies. So,
Isaac looked back to the symbol on the wall as he spoke. What's up with your possessed stencil artwork? It's a exorcisation rune. Gaelic. Well, at least my sources think it's Gaelic. It was found in an old tomb on the island of the North Sea. Could also be Scandinavian.
From how this shit looked, it could have been Martian. Is that it? I asked. Roseanne slung her bag over her shoulder. She dipped her head, looking towards us.
Sometimes there's not a lot you can do. We can only hope it does something. If not for Claire, for whomever might be in its sight next. Head back to your car now. I'll speak to Candice.
And with that, she walked up the grass slope towards the house. Isaac and I made the quiet journey back to the SUV. With a simple click of the key, the vehicle unlocked. I slid in and blasted the heater, hoping to dry off my soaked-ass clothes. And Isaac slid in, Maurice still wrapped in my jacket. Wait, Isaac, that's not ours. Isaac, I said, drawing out my voice. He turned, confused as to what was the matter. You gotta give the nice lady back her skinless demon. Isaac then literally scoffed, pulling Maurice close.
First, he ain't a skinless demon. He's a Siamese angel. Second, oh, come on, Dwight, he said, trying to pull some puppy dog eyes.
I mean, eye on me. Maurice rubbed his skinless head on Isaac's beard. Isaac, stealing things from creepy southern people, in the words, has never gone well. Like, ever. God knows if she has. 17 more wandering truckers, just like you, in her basement.
But...
Isaac, just take Maurice back to the damn house. And with a groan and a long,
fine.
Isaac hopped out the car and slowly shuffled back up into the manor. I reclined my seat, letting the heater slowly dry off my damp long sleeve. I tried to blast some music on the radio while typing some of this up, but I noticed after 5 minutes, nothing appeared on the radio. Nothing. Not 93.9, 101.1, and 34.7. Yes, that is apparently a possible channel. Nothing. It wasn't even radio static. It was just the sound of the cool breeze coming through the radio. This thing operated off satellites, so it couldn't be a broken antenna. This place was just cut off from the normal world. And I paused my haunted blogging session because I noticed Isaac and Roseanne heading back to the car. And slipping my phone away, they slipped back into the seats.
I'm sure you'll see him again, Isaac. Maurice sure seemed to like you,
Roseanne said, patting her resident Cyclops on the shoulder.
Yeah, still sucks though,
Isaac said, defeated, as he tossed me my leather jacket. I slipped it on, hoping it would help warm me up. Then realized my guns blazing response to the river earlier must have scared Maurice, because it now smelled like cat piss. God damn it. I pulled out of the circle drive of a house. The gate slowly opened as we approached and turned back onto the deserted roads of this godforsaken town. Roseanne reached over and plugged in another location. It was a small house near the eastern end of town, just off the main road.
Well, that was entertaining,
Roseanne said, surprisingly chipper for today's current events. I raised an eyebrow as I looked over the seat. You're taking things surprisingly well. Roseanne laughed.
Well, yes. Do this for a few years and you tend to learn to laugh at things, soldier boy.
She shook her head, sitting back. A few years? Wait, soldier boy? Roseanne pointed at Isaac, who scratched his beard.
Might have let a few things slip when we were talking and walking. Back to the car. Sorry, Dwight.
Roseanne leaned forward, eyeing me up and down as I drove. Like what? I asked, and Isaac chuckled.
Oh, you know, ghosts in the basement.
Again, I still don't know if it's a ghost.
That night in the storm. Your army days. You guys have seen Tim?
She said, enthusiastically. I took my eyes off the road and pulling up to a stop sign. You have seen Tim? I asked, and in hindsight, I'm not really surprised. Roseanne rested her chin on the seat as I pulled away.
So, tell me, are there really giants in Kandahar?
I sighed. No. Roseanne continued to press.
Is it true you guys hunted Bigfoots back in the 80s?
And I shook my head in disbelief. I'm like 34. How old do you think I am? And Roseanne shrugged.
Just saying. For a dog kicker, you've adapted pretty well to combating the cryptids living in your backyard.
I guess I have.
Missy, here's a counter question.
Isaac asked.
What's going on with these woods?
And Roseanne sat back and just shrugged.
Where do we start? Disappearances ranging all the way back to the 70s. You've got people turning up dead in ways thought imaginable. Stories of shapeshifters and attacks on campsites. Have you seen the stairs?
And I raised an eyebrow.
Yep,
Isaac said, nodding his head. I looked at him, and then at her. Stares. And Roseanne shivered.
Just don't go near them. But back to what we were saying. The woods are bloody fucked. And the type of things you seem to have been encountering, well, don't call me Captain Obvious, but it's organized. Your boss really must have pissed something off.
If only Theodore answered any of his goddamn calls or any other questions on his voicemails. At the GPS dings, we reached our next stop. This street was well maintained. Modern houses made of red brick and concrete lining the streets. And pulling up in front of the house, I could see a TV and lights on inside. So, what's the deal with this place? I asked, checking my weapon before stepping out.
I guess we'll see,
she said, cryptically. It's then the car screen buzzed and a very long-awaited name popped up on the screen. Incoming call, Theodore Kazimoth.
Well, holy shit.
I heard Isaac slap the dashboard.
Bad fucking time.
I gazed back at Roseanne. You and Isaac take this one. I got some things I need to hash out with my boss. Roseanne and Isaac cleared out of the car and began walking up to the house. And I pressed accept on the screen.
Hello?
The pompous voice of my boss, Theodore J. Kazimoth, entrepreneur, shareholder in several companies, and officially the worst real estate investor this side of the free world, came through the speaker.
Dwight, are you there?
Theodore, about fucking time you call. He was a millionaire, my boss, but after the past few months, I could not contain whatever anger was boiling in me at that point.
Oh, Dwight, now watch that mouth, young man. Extremely uncalled for, I assure you.
Uncalled for? Are you serious? This man is either delusional, in denial, or the most straightforward liar I had ever encountered. And I traded with words with lieutenants a lot. In retrospect, he was probably all of the above.
Now, Dwight, I did make the unorthodox request to lend lease you several $1,000s out of my pocket. I would appreciate some gratitude, considering you yourself could not make do with the equipment I had given you.
And arrogance soaked his voice. You slap a private estate down in the forests, more haunted than the Somme battlefield, and you expect me to drive off the demons with a 308 bolt action and a positive attitude?
Well, I mean, coming from the gun-ho former sergeant, now monster hunter, dragging my son into town on your private escapades?
And I raised an eyebrow. How did you? Theodore laughed through the phone.
You can't expect to post everything on the internet and not see my company's private forums blow up with requests about your little blog series. How can you?
Shit. Well, I expected.
On top of the bad reputation and the constant pandering I need to make to my investors, you, my friend, are becoming a thorn in my side. And I dislike thorns, Dwight.
You really expected me to stay with what we had? Wait for the enemy to break on through the gates and kill us all, including your fucking son that you left here? And Theodore's line grew quiet. I'm not going to act like you don't know what's going on, Theo. I know you do. But don't try to take some high ground when you neglected your only child. And then Theodore laughed. Like, really laughed. Like the kind of laugh that had the weight to send a shiver down my spine kind of laugh.
Dwight, you really should have just kept your mouth shut and done your job. Sure, sometimes it might get scary. Sometimes it might get, froggy, as you dumb grunts say. But that's just the way men like you are paid. Instead, you had to try and be a hero. Do what you think is right. Meddled in business that's certainly not yours.
I became my business the moment you dragged me out to this place.
Well, I guess you won't have to worry about that for long. Dwight, I'm coming back in the next few weeks with some company backup. So, unless you want to be one of those people who goes missing on that corkboard in the pub down the road, get your ass back up to the manor, lock and load your tricked out AR-15, and stay put.
Now, if we had been face to face, Theodore and I would be burning holes into each other's heads. The tense silence was only permeated by the sound of him clearing his throat. Whatever devilish tone he had dropped, left, and the only naive-sounding Theodore I remember returned.
Make sure John isn't gone for too long, Dwight. I hate to have to send a search party out in the winter. God, the ones around here never get the job done. Bad joke. I'm sorry. Stay safe, Dwight.
And then the call interface vanished, and I sat back in the driver's seat, thinking. Company backup? What? Did he think some armored goons are going to be enough to stamp out whatever's happening here? He might kill me, dump me in a ditch somewhere in the pine groves, but whoever else he hires will be too dumb, too ignorant, or too unprepared to avoid the shots they're now throwing at the estate. I opened my phone once again, updating you all. I don't know what Isaac and Roseanne are doing, but they seem to be having fun. And Isaac was yelling something, but it's too muffled by the car's heater, and... did a firework just go off? Well, Roseanne just texted me that they're almost done. Isaac is apparently trying to draw out the conversation with Daisy, the owner of the house, who apparently is also a raging alcoholic. Great. Like, we don't have bigger priorities. Oh, hold on. John's calling. Alright, change your plans, people. I gotta go. Now. I just screamed at Roseanne and Isaac to get in the fucking car now. John called from all the loud fucking noises in the background. He pleaded, no, screamed for me to get to his friend's house. Something is attacking them, and he doesn't know what. I've gotta go. No time to put a wrap on things. I'll be back. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. As I say, I've been waiting quite a few years to get this one started. Such a wonderful storyline with a captivating setting and the odd chuckle along the way. I hope you guys enjoyed that one as much as I. This is a 15-part series, so plenty more to come over the next coming week or so. Of course, a huge thank you to the author, ForestHasEyes, from over on Reddit, No Sleep. Really appreciate you allowing me to narrate this story on the show and finally bring it to all the listeners. And I hope you enjoy this as much as us. Well, guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things like myself, then please do get in touch with me at the contact email, which is as on screen. Contact the dead one at gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. I hope everyone's having a great start to the week, whether you're at work or studying, whatever it is that you do. I hope you're enjoying it, and you're staying fit and focused. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.